So know this, I've been a Kiss fan a very, very, very long time. It started out in 1976 for me. I was probably about 13 or 14 years old, and that was a magical time for music for me. And I got my first Kiss album, which was Kiss Destroyer, for Christmas that year. I wore that thing out. I mean, it was constantly on my turntable. I ate, lived, and breathed everything Kiss. And as soon as I could afford my next album, and that took me some time because I had to do odd jobs and everything to be able to afford to get it, I bought Kiss Alive, the first live album. And oh man, I mean, I played that thing cover to cover, both sides, or both albums, both sides of both albums, just nonstop, and absolutely was mesmerized by what I was hearing. Of course, I'm a young kid. I'm all fascinated by the makeup and the stage antics and the shows, and they did a very good job of trying to portray what that looked like in their album covers. They weren't just regular albums. They were like, just something special in their own sense, and so after that, of course, I went back and I got the first 3 albums before Alive, and I wore all those out. I completely just listened to those nonstop. So at this point, I've got everything through Destroyer except for the originals. A kid down, if you don't know what the originals are, that's a box set that came out back then, a very limited run back then. I think it was reissued once here not that long ago, but back then it was a box set that had the first 3 albums in it, be it the originals. And I had a kid down the street, and I can't remember what I traded him for it, but let's just say I got the better part of that deal, and I got the originals as a collector piece for me, at least as collecting as I could get as a young teenager. And I absolutely loved Kiss. I loved Kiss. Now, at the same time, all my friends at school saw it just like I did. The vast majority of them were just as big of fans as I was of Kiss. So it was fun getting to talk to all my friends and everything at school, and of course in the neighborhood, and talk about all of that, because that was one thing we all had in common. And that lasted up through after Alive too. Of course, I continued to get Rock and Roll Over, and then I got Love Gun, and then Alive 2. And then after that, of course, I bought all 4 solo albums and then double platinum. So I owned every one of those albums. Now, once we came back from summer break, and this was when the right after the solo albums came out, Kiss started kind of fall out of favor. They really kind of went from being super popular to kind of, okay, we're past that, but yet I still hung on. I hung on, and I continue to hang on. To this day, I have purchased every single Kiss album ever made. I stayed a fan throughout all of the history of all of that. And I saw them numerous times and absolutely loved the band. Of course, when you're a fan, you put these people on a pedestal. You don't really know what they're really like, because you didn't have MTV or anything like that back then. And so you never really got a chance to see them talk or to see them live or anything, with the exception of, I think it was a midnight special, or no, it was one interviewer guy that they played on for Halloween. It was cool. It's out there on the internet now. You can see it pretty easily. But I did get a chance to see that when I was young. So that was the closest I'd gotten to it. And I've always loved Ace Frehley. Always, always, always. As a guitar player, he was the one I aspired to be. But I liked all of them. And I read everything I could about every single one of them to get to know anything and everything as much as you could consume out there about these guys. And so I remained loyal. I have remained loyal throughout all these years. Today, I'm 61 years old. We're talking about from 14 years old to 61. And I remember when I was living in Chicago, I was able to take my oldest son, Eric, to go see them live. I think that was on the Psycho Circus tour. Got to see them go see them live in Chicago. And I was able to take him to go see that. And then probably about 5 years ago, I was able to take my other 2 sons, Noah and Joshua, to go see them over in not Lakeland, but Tampa, here in Florida. And just, I wanted them to experience what it was like to experience what I experienced as a young person. And it was absolutely wonderful getting to share that. But, with the advent of kind of social media and the way you can really access people's lives and everything in a way that you never could before, over time, I really got disillusioned with Gene and Paul completely. I always felt terrible for Ace and Peter. And yes, they both had their demons. And certainly Ace finally dealt with his. I wished he could have continued on with it, but sadly he's gone now. And I started thinking about the outpouring of love that Ace has gotten. And I'm sure Peter will get very similar outpourings. Let's hope that's not for a very long time, but similar outpourings, because they were the ones that I always felt like were really treated unfairly. Yes, did they leave the band on their own accord? Yes, they did. And I'm not here to judge that. And so you can make a case either way against my argument that I'm about ready to make. But Gina and Paul, I honestly, my opinion, I think they're despicable human beings. I think they're absolutely selfish. I don't think they care about anything but themselves. I think they find a way to justify, the way that they treated both Peter and Ace when they came back for the reunion tour. I thought that was just terrible. Basically hired them as hired guns, They should have gotten an equal cut along with everybody else. And no, Paul, you can go shove it where the sun doesn't shine when you say that you two continued that band. We didn't come to see the band. When that Psycho Circus tour, we did not come to see the band that was the band of the 90s. No diss to any of them. I love Bruce Kulick, but we didn't come to see that. We came to see the original four members, and that should have been equal shares for everybody. And that really started my turning point. That really started my turning point. And as much as I think about it, where both Ace and Peter have dealt with their demons, well, here's what I can say. They didn't become a demon. And no, Gene, I'm not talking about a character. I'm talking about a real life demon, okay? Now, that may be a little bit harsh, and that may be a fair statement, but I think I'm using that to emphasize my point. I think you're selfish people. I don't think anybody's going to remember you in the same way. You're not going to get the same outpouring of love when you pass on that Ace got. Ace is getting it from everywhere. I cannot recall anyone passing away to get this much attention nonstop. Everywhere you look, there's tributes to Ace Frehley for good reason. For good reason. That was a band that was a sum of its parts. All four people gave equally to the overall success of that band. And for them to be treated the way they were and not allowed to come on to play for the farewell tour, that was also disgusting and despicable. That's when I said I have nothing to do with Gene Simmons or Paul Stanley ever again. So am I a fan of Kiss today? No, I'm not. I'll hang on to my youth. I'll hang on to my youth memories. And then I'll forget the crap that you guys pull, because as far as I'm concerned, Gene and Paul, you are despicable human beings. You had chances to do the right thing. You had chances to be fair, but you were both so full of yourself, so arrogant, that you thought you were the band, and you're not. Not from a fan's point of view. Maybe from a business perspective, sure. And I get that it's a business. I fully understand that. However, it's the fans that make that business succeed or fail. And ultimately, just be glad you got out when you did, because I don't think anybody would come to see you if you tried to do your final tour after Ace passed away. I'd be shocked. I could be wrong, but I'd be shocked. So that's my 2 cents on the subject. I'm a little bit out of shape on this one, you can tell. Anyway, like I said in the beginning, agree to disagree. We all have a right to our opinions. I have a right to mine. You have a right to yours. I'll respect yours. Respect mine. That's all I ask. Be fair. That's it. All right. Till next time, have a great day. Bye-bye.